just wanna talk about some books. Hey, I just wanna talk about some books. Talk about some books. Talk about some books. Hey, I just wanna talk about some books with you.
Hey everybody, I'm Joe,
And I'm JoJo, and this is Canonical Nonsense.
and we are just two Joe Schmoes reading books.
And this season, we are exploring the dragon canon and the portrayal of dragons in modern fantasy. So, what are we talking about today?
Today we are discussing Joust by Mercedes Lackey. Some background on Joust and Mercedes Lackey. Joust is part of a 4-book series titled Dragon Jousters and was first published in 2003, which seemed like it was a good year for dragon books. Aragon was also published in 2003. I think Tooth and Claw was published in 2003 as well. If you are an avid fantasy reader, the name Mercedes Lackey may be familiar, and this is probably because she has published over 100 books during her career and is still actively writing. Many of her other series take place in the world of Velgarth. However, Joust does not seem to take place in the same world. She also has series that center around magical horses, so shout out to our horse girl listeners.
It's so clear to me the more I read dragon books that the Venn diagram of horse girls and dragon girls is just a circle.
I think it's true, yeah. She does have another book series about griffins, where griffins are a big part of it. So if there are griffin girlies out there, here you go. Go find this book series. Joust takes an in-depth look into dragon husbandry because we can't have a book without knowing that, I think. Mercedes Lackey has a degree in biology and has worked at a raptor rescue. She also owns multiple pet birds and seems to be an avid animal lover in general. And knowing this, I think some of the details of the book really make sense. When you had first started the book, you said to me, because I hadn't started it yet, that you can tell that she really understands animals. And that is something that I really agree with now that we've finished the book. I wonder if it comes from this background.
Yeah, this is funny because I just watched the Superman movie, and in it, they have a very bad dog. And I feel like to really understand animals, you have to know when they're like perfect and also when they're kind of terrible. And that's sort of what I love about this book is that the animals just they have so much behavior and like character to them. And that's how you know, sometimes you read a book about an animal and it's a stuffed animal and you move it around, but like, the dragons are great. You're gonna love this book.
Just a reminder to listeners, this is a spoiler-rich podcast. So if you don't want the book spoiled for you, please go read it now and we will be here when you get back. But if you would like to know whether or not we would recommend it before you go and read it, would we recommend this book, JoJo?
Oh yeah, this book slaps.
Yeah, this book was great. You should go read it.
We actually had a conversation about whether or not this is the best book we've ever read for this podcast. I don't think it's either of our number one all-time favorites, but I do think it's maybe the best book we've ever read. And we'll talk about that when we talk about the themes of the book, which we were really into.
I think I've said this before on this podcast, but there's a difference between enjoying something and something being good. And I think you can enjoy something that's really bad and you can also enjoy something that's really good and you can not enjoy something that's really good. And I think this is like maybe the most competently written book that we've read so far. And I did really enjoy it, but I don't know if it's like it has some pretty heavy themes, so it might not be the most enjoyable book to everybody, but it is really great. And I think that if you do like some heavy themes in your books, this book does a great job with them. So before we get into the themes, I do want to just state some trigger warnings that are in the book. And some of these are also themes. So colonization is the big one. There is a huge through line of colonization and all of the trauma and oppression that goes along with colonization. So if that's something that you want to protect yourself against, this might not be the book for you. There's also child abuse in this book. We have depictions of mental health disorder and trauma within the main character that do feel like PTSD. We also have really brutal descriptions of conflict and death of civilians that feel very kind of realistic to what we hear about when we hear about different acts of warfare that are happening even currently. And we also have a suggestion of sexual assault. This is only like the suggestion of it, and it also happens off page within the memory of the main character, but is not happening to the main character. It's happening to someone else in his village. But it is stressful to read. And then this is a very minor one, but we do have some fat phobic language as well. All right. Anything you would like to add there?
No, that's all of them.
So let's get into the plot. So we open the book on our main character, Vetch. He is around 10 or 11, though he doesn't actually know his exact age anymore. He is a serf in the conquered land of Alta. Because he is a serf, he is tied to the land but does not own the land that he is connected to, and this is his ancestral homeland that he no longer owns. He isn't on the specific property that his family owned before his land was conquered. In order for the colonizers, which are the Tians, to work the land, they must keep at least one serf who was part of that landscape living on that land. And they're supposed to care for their serfs, you know. What we see is pretty obvious, the kind of things that would happen when you are forced to have this person on your land that you have to feed but is taking money from you, and you're the one enriching yourself from that landscape. So there's a lot of abuse there. There are also slaves in this world, though the system of slavery does seem more like the Roman system of slavery, in which slaves are seen as having a value and they do have a good chance of being freed within their lifetime. Obviously all slavery is bad, but when we are comparing the serfdom to the slavery within this world, the serfdom does seem more like the chattel slavery that we see during later colonization and early America and all of that stuff. And then the slavery that we see in this world does seem more like an ancient system of slavery.
I mean, I think it's worth saying that this is a book that is very interested in class and colonization and power as it's wielded. And it's part of the way that it talks about that is having different types of oppression that are like layered on each other like a terrible onion.
Yeah, and just to give you a little bit more world building, the serfs are not owned by the person who is working the land. The serfs are actually the property of the king, but they are tied to the land that they are on. Just so that is clear. And because comes next, that's important to know. Do you want to add anything to this?
We're like forefronting a lot of the legal system because it makes sense for the context of the story that we're supposed to tell, but know that the book doesn't be like, anyway, here's the legal system. We're doing that to give you context. You actually find this out very naturally throughout the book. Like Vetch theorizes that the reason that he's being kept is because he's tied to the land, and then in owning him, he owns the land. But that's not confirmed for like 3 or 4 more chapters.
Yeah, in this part of the book, Vetch is thinking about how he can curse his owner, whose name is Kefti, and he calls him Kefti the Fat, who is an evil potter, which I always love an evil potter in a book. Like, I feel like that's a thing that I see a lot, specifically an evil potter or evil pottery. um,
I was just gonna say, yes, it's very cute, but also Vetch is so cute in his introduction. He's this little kid who's like clearly having a terrible time, but thinks about little kid things. Like he's always
yeah.
hungry, so he's thinking about getting food. And he's like really upset with Kefti the Fat because he's abusing him. And the way he does that is by like making clay dolls of him and then like burying them and then like stepping on them to like curse him, and then he's like wrapped up in the wording of the curse to make sure it goes right. It's very cute.
There's this really, it's, like, a little heartbreaking because he makes this clay figurine of Kefti that he had to he found the clay in the river because he can't use any of Kefti's clay, and he makes this figure, and he's, like, really proud of it. He thinks it's his best figurine yet, and he buries it along a path that he has to walk while he's doing, the labor for Kefti, and he's using the same curse that he heard a practitioner create when they were creating a curse for someone else, where it was like, every time my sandal walks over you, you'll I don't know, you'll feel it somehow. It'll be like cursed, or so you'll be like struck down or something. And he uses that when he creates the curse and buries it. And then he's like, well, I don't wear sandals, so maybe it doesn't have any effect at all. And you're like, oh, you're so sweet. Like, even though you're cursing someone, but it's like, oh, that is definitely something that a little kid would think, like, oh no, because I worded this curse wrong. not going to actually affect this person when it's like probably not going to affect the person because it doesn't actually have any power.
Yeah, there's a weird balance of magic in this that I really like, where there is magic users who have spells and stuff, but for the most part, there's not a lot of magic in the world. And
Yeah.
then they talk a lot about ghosts, but we don't ever see them.
Yeah. It might be that ghosts aren't real. I don't know. And but it's just like a superstition.
Yeah, it's unclear what's real magic and what's not. And I kind of like that ambiguity. Ambiguity.
Ambiguity.
Ambiguity?
Ambiguity.
Can you
Oh
tell
my
we haven't podcasted in a while?
Yeah, we took a little break.
We can't talk anymore.
All right, this is where the fat phobic language comes into play if that is something that you're really sensitive to, because Kefti's excess and greed are tied to his obesity. But I think we can understand that this is a story told from the perspective of number one, a child, but a child who is being abused by this person. And he also does have rage issues that we see throughout the book. So I think it makes sense for his character to add that kind of epithet to this person's name.
Yes, Kefti is fat, and it's supposed to symbolize the fact that he is both greedy and slovenly, that he keeps all of his wealth to himself, and that he doesn't do any work. He makes Vetch or his apprentices do all the work. So that's why in a desert where a lot of the people are quite thin and food access is quite limited, like this one character is heavy, and it's both storytelling in a way that like here's how somebody is shaped this way, and also rhymes with and plays with sort of fat phobic stereotypes. One thing I kind of noted in the book is there isn't like a celebration of skinniness.
No,
It's
yeah.
just sort of like this one character. So I just think that the fat phobia in this is like complicated, but Kefti does suck.
I think it's okay if you are more sensitive to that kind of thing. Just be aware that, like, he is only in, like, one part of the book. Alright. Kefti is especially cruel to Vetch and forces him to fill a cistern of water with a bucket that is too large for him to carry. And part of this is because he has a small patch of a tala field, which tala is a very, very expensive plant that is used to drug the dragons so that they are able to be handled by the people who are riding them, what are called the dragon jousters in this world. And so he has to fill up the cistern because this is in the middle of the desert, and it's extremely warm out. If he stops even for a second and Kefti sees him, he will be beaten horribly, and he knows this, and he's thinking about this as he is carrying the bucket. And he also is thinking in his mind that he's really thirsty, but he can't drink any of the water because if Kefti sees him drinking the water, then he will also beat him because he sees it as a waste for this water to be drunk by this person instead of used on the tala field. As he is approaching the cistern, he sees that a jouster has landed beside it and is drinking from the well, or like from the cistern. And he's enraged by this. He is like ready to fight this guy. This 10-year-old boy is ready to fight this guy because he's like, "Are you serious? Like, you're undoing all my hard work." And after the jouster finishes drinking, he pours the rest of the bucket over his head, wasting the rest of this water. We learn later that this is the jouster named Ari, and the dragon that he has is named Kashet. Vetch drops his bucket and is actively going to confront Ari when Kefti does appear. And Kefti sees that Vetch is not carrying his bucket, so he does start beating him because he thinks he isn't working. And he doesn't see the jouster. The jouster stops Kefti from beating Vetch by like grabbing his arm, and he says that he's requisitioning the serf because jousters are able to requisition any of the king's property and that he needs a dragon boy. So he grabs Vetch, he throws him onto the dragon, and he carries him off. And he's brought to the dragon stable.
Yeah, Vetch frickin' hates that. He swears never to do it, which fair. If I was getting beaten and then all of a sudden I was on the back of the dragon, I would not be having a fun day.
He's also thrown across the dragon like belly down. So he's like kind of like a
Real sack of potatoes.
yeah, he's like he can't see anything except the ground. So, I mean, that doesn't sound like a very fun way to ride a dragon at all. And do you want to talk about the dragons here? Do you want to talk about what they look like?
Oh, yeah. I loved this part of the book specifically because it's one of the first books we've read in a while that doesn't just assume that you know what a dragon looks like. They give you like a full description. Do you want to read it? It's great.
Yeah. So this is a world where most people don't see dragons on an everyday basis. So like Vetch talks about how like, oh well, I've seen them flying overhead, but I haven't seen one up close. So this is the first time he sees a dragon up close. So he says the dragon was a thing of multicolored jeweled beauty, slim and supple, and quite as large as the shed it was perched on. A narrow, golden, large-eyed head, oddly reminiscent of a well-bred horse's, with the same slim muscle, dished nose, and broad forehead, was surmounted by a bony crest that shaded from deep green to pale electrum, as pale and translucent as the finest alabaster. That elegant golden head rose on a long, flexible neck that shaded from emerald to blue, the wings, of blue shading into purple, rising from muscular shoulders twice the bulk of the hindquarters, were spread to catch the sun. The long whip-like tail, which reversed the shading of the neck, going from green to gold, was curled around the cruel golden talons of the forefeet as the dragon lounged comfortably on the flat roof of the shed. The eyes, though, were what caught you and held you, the slip-pupilled and deep crimson of the finest rubies. Not that Vetch had ever seen the finest rubies, or indeed any rubies. And then once they're in the dragon stables, he talks about the other dragons. They weren't all green and gold of Cashit. There were blue ones in all shades from dark to light, red ones, a purple color, and a pale gold and silver. The colors were dazzling, gorgeous, and they filled his eyes in the way that a fine meal filled the appetite. Already Vetch could tell that there was a profound difference between these dragons and Cashit. So they're all different colors, but they're like bright colors.
Yeah, jewel tones.
He enters the dragon stable, and this is a TN dragon stable. And here is where he meets another character named Harakat, who is the man. He kind of manages the stables in the jouster. He's the overseer. Harakat takes him around and shows him how to feed Cashit. So he kind of explains a little bit about why Cashit is different. Do you want to explain what's different about Cashit?
Yeah. So we find out pretty early that Cachette was raised from an egg. Should I just like tell the whole Ari lore dump that we get over like several
Yeah,
chapters?
so we get this over time.
So first we find out that Cachette was raised from an egg because all of the jousters are nobles. We find out eventually that Ari wasn't a noble, that he was actually a scribe that was sent to work at the dragon stables. And then we find out that like Ari kind of had to leave school because his dad died to like go work, and he was just such a like huge big nerd about dragon eggs that when one of the dragons accidentally mated, he stole one of the eggs and then raised it.
Going and looking at wild dragons, and he stole one from a wild dragon.
Oh, he stole one from Wild Dragon?
Yeah, he steals a dragon egg and he raises Cashit. Yeah, it must have been. No, I don't know. He raises Cashit from an egg by burying his egg in one of the stable's sand pits, and then he like turns the egg 3 times a day. But we also learn that this is really unusual, like no one else has done this. And we learn that there are multiple reasons for this. And we don't learn all of this now. We learn this throughout the book. But one of the reasons is that Cashit will probably only ever allow Ari to ride him and no one else. So if Ari were to die in battle, they would probably have to kill Cashit. He wouldn't be useful. The other reason is that there's like a lot of glory and like cultural value surrounding the act of like taming and catching a dragon. So
A lot of machismo.
yeah, they see it as like a manly act to catch and tame a wild dragon instead of having like to raise this dragon from the egg. It also seems like while it's a lot of work to tame a dragon, it seems like it is less work to do that than to have each person have to like raise the dragon and spend all this time with the baby dragon, and the baby dragon's like not useful for so many years. So there seems like there are a few reasons, though it does seem like, well, in the long term, it would be better if you if you just raise these dragons from the eggs.
So a lot of this book is about animal lovers really fucking hating
Yeah.
people who just like use animals that are raised by other people. And this is another part of it where like it's really the nobles just don't want to do the work, you know?
So I feel like that's a theme in this book, the labor of the lower classes.
That the noble classes take credit for? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so the dragons who aren't Cashette, because Cachette's not like other girls.
No, Cachet's like the prettiest, smartest girl in the entire barn, and like Cachet knows it.
Cashit does know it. Ugh, he's so cute. Also, I love him. He is, like, such a cute little guy. So, now that we've gone through all of that exposition, that is way better laid out in the book than what we just did. Haraket's taking Vetch around and is showing him how to feed Cashit, and he takes him to where all of the meat is distributed and also where the tala is, like, put on the meat, and he's like, "Never feed Cashit the tala. Cashit doesn't need it." And it's because he was raised from the egg where the other dragons were not, and the other dragons do really need it. And so the tala acts like a drug, it calms them down and makes them a little bit sleepy, but not too sleepy.
Dragon Xanax.
Yeah. Yeah, it's trazodone for dragons instead of dogs. So Harakat also explains to Vetch that Vetch answers to him, Ari, and Cashit, and no one else. So no one else can order Vetch around. He gets his orders from those two people, and he really his only responsibilities are to Ari and to Cashit.
This is just like a really quick example of how Harakat and Ari are both very aware that Vetch is a serf and can be
Mhm.
easily abused by the people, and they're trying to like protect him.
Yeah. They are, like, very good people in this book, and there is throughout the book, and we'll probably get into it more, a lot of confusion and thought from Vetch surrounding how he both really cares for these 2 people and really hates them and has really complicated feelings for them because they are the enemy.
Because they're actively perpetuating a system of oppression against him and his people.
Yeah, and, like, directly because Ari is a jouster, so he's actively even killing his people. And then Vetch has his first real meal in years. Do you wanna talk about that?
It's just so cute because he spends so much time at the beginning of the book talking about food because he's so hungry, and it's not the whole book, but like God, when he gets his first bite, he like almost cries. He's
Yeah.
what I love about Vetch is that he's such a 10-year-old boy, even though he's dealing with like all of these like deep traumatizing issues and like complex life choices, and sometimes he just wants to eat some bread and some meat.
Yeah, he gets his first meat in years too, specifically, and it's a really, like, high quality cut of meat, I think he says, because
Mhm.
and he, like, theorizes, and it's later confirmed, that it's the meat that's coming from the temple sacrifices, because the temple sacrifices, when they sacrifice animals to the gods only want the blood and the essence, like the spirit of the animal, so the rest of the meat is distributed for the dragons and for the people who are tending the dragons, which is also something that happened. I don't know a ton about ancient Egyptian day-to-day culture and religion, but in, like, Greece and Rome, when they sacrificed animals, they did that too, like, the meat was used and distributed, and it was a way for people who didn't usually have the opportunity to get meat to have a very, like, high quality, protein-rich dinner. That was kind of fun to see here too. In the beginning of the book, he is, like, talking about how he's, like, having to dig for roots beside the river because Kefti just isn't giving him enough food at all, and the food that Kefti does give him is, like, stale, really tough, hard bread and, like, not even, like, enough of it for him to really ever feel full, and he just was hungry. He talks about, like, having stomach cramps constantly because of how hungry he is for, like, years and years, and he's finally able to fill himself, but he also talks about, like, in this scene, he talks about how he knows he can't just stuff himself or it'll make him sick because he, like, has witnessed that happening to other people.
It happened to him.
Oh, it did happen to him, yeah, he was, like, somehow able to get a meal, and he got really sick, so he, like, paces himself even though he doesn't want to. So we see how smart he is. He's, like, really, really smart in many ways.
I mean, we see it in multiple ways where, like, he theorizes the surf thing and then it's confirmed later. He
Yeah,
theorizes the meat things and it's confirmed later, which is
yeah.
both, like, a good way of, like, world building, and that's not just, like, pure like, he's figuring it out with
Mhm.
you.
Yeah, and it's not like, "This is how this works, listener, reader." The other reason that this scene is important is he's, like, listening to the boys talk, because he's, like, going about his day, but he's, like, listening to the other dragon boys talk, and each dragon boy is assigned to a specific dragon.
Yeah, and all the dragon boys are free boys, which is why, actually Vetch got picked because Ari's boy got too good for dragon boying.
Yeah. They also talk about them aging out of it too, where, like, Vetch probably wouldn't age out of it because he could, like, continue doing it forever.
Yeah, so in some ways it's like, "Yay, this serf gets to have a better life," but then also it's like, "Oh, wow, this is much easier and cheaper. He's not gonna talk back because he can't." Like, the free boys are gonna do it. It also establishes this outsider dynamic where he's the only one of his kind, so he has to be the best version of himself.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting, like, model minority situation that we see in Vetch.
Yeah, he thinks about that. He's like, "If I don't do well enough, then, like, they could, first of all, send me back, take me back to Kefti, which I don't wanna go. And also, like, that would mean that they would realize that this wouldn't work for other people. And he also talks about, like, if he does too well, then the other dragon boys will resent him and he could be in danger from them because they will then have to work harder to meet, like, the standards that Vetch is showing. So he's in this really complicated situation. He recognizes that.
And he sort of deals with it by isolating himself. I mean, Harakat starts by isolating himself and then continues.
Yeah, his fear turns to anger all the time. So he immediately is angry with he has a lot of anger and resentment towards the free boys because of their position and how they do have the ability to harm him really easily. Like, and because of what we just said, like that resentment could turn toward him. So he is kind of meeting that with having resentment towards them first. So he's listening to the other dragon boys talk, but he's like not near them. And they give a lot of really, really helpful exposition for a lot of things. So this is actually where we learn that Kashet was raised from an egg. We also learn that the jousters are like how the jousters are perceived by the king. So they're kind of owned by the king. They can't own any land. They live in these quarters. They are kind of at the behest of the king. So they kind of weirdly there's like this parallel between serfdom with the jousters and serfdom with Vetch. And Ari recognizes this, but the other jousters don't. And it's very different, obviously, because the jousters have a ton of acclaim. They are very valued by society. They are seen as very attractive, kind of have the superstar status to the people of the society.
I had a question. Do you think that they're equivalent to gladiators?
Yeah, I was seeing a lot of parallels to gladiators, especially with like the boys are talking about like Ari's sexual history.
Yeah, all they're making money by passing notes to them from
Yeah.
noblewomen, and Vetch is mad because he's like, "I bet those noblewomen would just order me around without giving me any money to pass notes."
Yeah, but they are talking about how it's kind of futile that the women are doing this because he doesn't show any interest in any of these women, even though they continue to try because it seems like these dragon jousters are like really, really, yeah, they're like gladiators, how
You're
like
you're
like no
you're
no
dancing around the point. Ari's not interested in these women because he's interested in sex workers. They talk about dancing women that come to his room and also that he goes and sees, which is like they want to be like, look, Ari fucks, but he pays for it, and that's totally fine. And you're like, all right, great.
I think they're also making the point that he doesn't want to it's not just that he's, like, trying to have, like, an uncomplicated sexual experience, but I think he also has some, like, resentment towards that rich class of people because these are, like, high class women, like, these are noble women who are trying to get his attention, and he's already kind of in this strange situation because he is a jouster for the king, so he's kind of, like, owned by the king, and I think he knows this, and he, like, doesn't want to be owned by another person too.
He understands that it's all transactional, and
Yeah.
he prefers to be the one making the transaction, is kind of the impression that I got.
Yes, I think that's a really good way of putting it.
It's worth saying that they establish really early that Ari fucks, and then, like, it's not really a part of his character later, so it's just kind of funny.
It's weird.
Yeah, it's like, "Don't worry, Ari fucks," and then we just see this buff nerd feeling sad about his place in a conflict outside of his control, being trapped by his love of dragons.
Yeah.
Y you know,
Yeah. I mean, it's weird that this is even in the book at all.
I thought it was funny because they're like, "By the way, we want you to know that he fucks, moving on."
Yeah. They also talk about what happens when a dragon throws a rider. So this is where Vetch learns that like if a dragon throws a rider, they're probably dead, like dead. And that happens often. So we learn that like throughout the book we learn that like the reason they use jousting sticks or lances instead of bows and arrows is because their dragons are taught to like they're trained to catch arrows. And they can't, like, train it out of them to not catch the arrows they shoot, but to catch the arrows that are coming toward them. So the jousting sticks are made to, like, push another rider off the dragon, and it just seems like it's extremely dangerous. So while we understand that these jousters can get a lot of acclaim and status through this occupation, they usually die very quickly, which is, again, another reason why it seems more cost effective to just tame feral dragons rather than raise them from the egg. So we kind of go through the day with Vetch. He learns how to clean Cashit's pen. We learn about like dragon poop here. Do you want to talk about it?
I mean, I thought it was great because I think it's the first time a dragon's pooped in, like, 4 books.
Yeah, there was dragon poop in the beginning of Aragon where Aragon was like, she's pooping everywhere and I don't know what to do with it when he's still hiding her in the village. But other than that, yeah.
Serafina also has
Oh
giant
yeah.
piles of dragon poop.
Yeah, she's like, "I don't wanna say the word poop because I don't wanna say the word poop in front of the boy I like."
Yeah, but it smells rank over here. That was a funny scene. I just think
Yeah.
it's funny because, like, for some reason, dragons fuck in every book, but they poop in every, like, 5 books, so
Yeah, we have to know how the dragons fuck in every book. Gotta know that. We
yeah.
also do learn that here too.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, so he's told, like, apparently the dragon poop does have a lot of value. We don't actually learn what. I assume it's for fertilizer or something. So he has to, like, give the dragon poop to, like, people who collect it. But the stable has, like, this really big what's called a wallow in it, which is this giant pit of heated sand that the dragons can bury themselves in. And then they have basically, like, a kitty litter box that they poop in, which is very funny. And they have, like, a water trough, and their stables are open to the sky, and when it rains, they have an awning that they pull over the stable, but the entire stable area, like, including the hallways, is open to the sky, and the dragons can kinda see over the top of their stable, so they, like, will peek over when he'll, like, be walking by, and he'll be, like, mentioning that the dragons are, like, peeking over the wall of the stable to look at him, which is very cute because 'cause they're very curious, and they seem kinda nosy. And often they try to keep an empty stable between each dragon, at least one, because the dragons have been known to kind of snap at each other if they're like peeking over the stable at each other. So there's an empty stable on either side of Cashit.
Small note, but the dragons don't seem like herd animals in this one, which is interesting.
Yeah. They seem like fission fusion where they'll come together to do certain things. It said later in the book that like they're talking about if a dragon escapes, other dragons might help take the harness off of that dragon. So they will like participate in like group behaviors, but that they seem perfectly happy to be solitary as well. So they're like coyotes, kind of giant coyotes. So throughout the day, Vetch goes through his duties. He's taken to the jouster's quarters where he is shown how to clean the room. The person who is in charge of the quarters is called Kay Velathat.
Sounds great. He's not an important character.
No, but this is another example. So, Vetch looks at him and he's like, "This guy is a freed slave. He was a slave and now he's free." And he's looking at his clothes and like his clothes are very pristine. These people wear like wigs that are very like ancient Egypt coded. And he is like looking at the wig and thinking like that it's a very fine quality wig. And he is kind of thinking about that hierarchy again surrounding serfs, slaves, freed slaves, lower class teens, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he again has a lot of resentment for this man because he is kind of expecting this man to feel resentment towards him. So he, out of spite, cleans Ari's chambers really, really well. And the guy does seem like he's like really impressed with it. Like he wasn't expecting much. And Vetch like is expecting him to not expect much because he's like, he probably thinks I'm stupid because I am an Alton serf.
Yeah, just a small side note about the wigs and the hair. So Vetch has long uncut hair, and that's
Mhm.
how you can tell he's a serf from a distance. So everyone who sees Vetch knows that he's a serf based on his hair.
Yeah, he's not allowed to cut his hair. it seems like most people in, like, high society in, Tia they either, like, shave their head and wear a wig, like, Harakat has a shaved head, but he doesn't wear a wig, but Ari has hair. It's described that he has hair. Another thing that he has to do is he has to polish Kashet's scales, and this scene was really sweet because Kashet is so darling. He's such a sweet little guy. So they take him to this specific room where they polish his scales with rough sand to get all the dead skin off and, like, to shine them and burnish them, and then he oils the skin, and Kasha's just eating it up and, like, kind of turning towards him like, "Oh, yeah, get that spot, that feels good," and is groaning, and I don't know, he's just such a dog. He's so cute. And he also kind of sees how the other people are having to handle the dragons, so the other dragons are led around by these choke collars that are basically like a choke collar that you would see, like, on a dog, where it chokes off their, like, windpipe a little bit, but it seems like it keeps them from being able to, like I don't think dragons in this book can breathe fire, can they?
If they can breathe fire, they don't do it. But they don't explicitly say they can't breathe fire. So, I don't know, maybe in book 2.
Maybe in book 2. But when he is leading Kashet around, he just is to lead him around by standing at his shoulder and giving him very firm commands, and Kashet does follow them. And that's his first day. He's given dinner, and then he is told that he is to sleep in a cot in Kashet's pen because Ari doesn't want Kashet to be alone. We do learn later that this is because Ari is worried that the other boys will be cruel to Vetch. Vetch kind of theorizes this too. He's like, I wonder if this is to keep me away from the other boys so they aren't going to hurt me. Because the other boys are really wary around the dragons, and Vetch isn't, especially around Kashet. Like, he understands pretty quickly that Kashet's not going to hurt him. So he's like, the boys aren't going to try to sneak in to Kashet's pen to try to get to me. He also notes that the bed that is given to him in Kashet's pen or it's like a little cot, but it has an Alton pillow instead of a Tia headrest. So they are, like, thinking about his lifestyle and, like, his homeland a little bit when they're giving him these things. And this continues throughout the book with the things that Ari and Harkat give him. And he thinks about his luck. And this is where he has his first round of really conflicted feelings about his new masters because, they do own him. And he recognizes this. He recognizes that they are much kinder to him, at least for now, than Kefti was. And he feels lucky for that. But he also feels a lot of resentment because he is an oppressed class. And if these colonizers have never come onto his land, then he would be able to live with his family on his family farm without any of this bullshit. So he has these and this book is really internal. So it's very much him thinking about the things that he's experiencing and thinking about his relationship to these other people and theorizing, like, well, what are their intentions? And this is like a survival method too. Like, he has to think this way so that he can survive, so he can keep himself safe. And so sometimes that is incorrect and sometimes it's correct. Like, he theorizes that Ari is keeping him away from the other boys to protect him. But he also theorizes that, like, there are characters later in the book, he theorizes that they don't have the best intentions for him because of their class or, like, their position within the society, and he's not correct in his assumptions. And it's really interesting to watch him kind of go through these mental gymnastics and how much energy that must take and how much energy that does take and how it is because he is trying to survive.
I was gonna say it also adds a lot of conflict in a book, which is, I'm gonna say 3 or 4 chapters of a small child learning how to do chores.
Yeah.
Like, it's so fucking compelling because 'cause you're like, "Yeah, man, he's trying to grapple with systems of oppression," and it's like, "Here's how you do leather work. Here's how you
Yeah.
scratch this one, dragon's scales," Like, it really makes the story compelling even when the story is not compelling.
Yeah. Over the next few days, he is going through other tasks where he learns how to care for the lances, he learns how to process the tala, he learns how to take care of the harness for Kashet, things like that. He gets, like, a bath for the first time and is given, like, the uniform of the dragon boy. But he does talk about how when he wakes up, he smiles and he hums a hymn and he even laughs, and he remarks that he hasn't done any of these things in years. And Harakat, when he comes to, like, talk to him about, like, "Oh, this is your first full day, this is what to expect," he notices and he, like, does smile a little bit. Harakat's very, like, professional. Like he's very like there's like a step between him and everyone he talks to where he seems like he's trying to keep professional distance, but he does seem like he has a lot of affection for Vetch. So he's told that he needs to feed Cash at first. That's the first thing you're supposed to do in the morning, feed the dragon. And it's important for him to feed Cash at first because Cashit's hungry, he hasn't eaten in a while, but it's really important for the dragons who are drugged with Tala to be fed first because it's such a long period of time between their dinner and their breakfast that the Tala has worn off more than between their other meals. So it's the most dangerous point of the day for them.
Also, if a dragon is hungry, they're liable to act outside of their training. And if they like bite a person and figure out that they're meat, then they might get a taste for human blood
Yeah.
and start eating people, which is crazy.
Yeah, Haruka warns Vetch, he's like, if you like dragon boys often, like if there's a conflict between two dragons, if two dragons start fighting each other, usually the person who dies is a dragon boy because they're the ones that are like leading them around. So be careful.
There's a lot in this book about how dragons are wild animals that can be somewhat trained, but never in this book other than Kasha do you feel like the dragons are not wild, which I think is really interesting and cool.
Yeah, it's like when you hear like people who work in zoos, like how they have to navigate working with lions or like other really dangerous animals, where this animal is really used to their presence and has been trained to accept certain commands, but they still have to like really be careful when they're working with them so that they don't get killed themselves. Ari notices when he feeds Kashet that he's really still hungry after his first wheelbarrow full of meat. So he asks Harkat, hey, he still seemed hungry. And Harkat's like, yes, good. Like, always ask me first, but let's give him a basket of hearts. And Kashet loves them. He like savors them a little bit. He like throws them into the air and then catches them in his little mouth. Yeah, so then he like harnesses Kashet and Ari comes and leaves with him. He then cleans out the stall and goes to eat breakfast. And here he has this moment of loneliness because he's sitting alone, eating alone. And he allows this to turn into rage against the other boys who are sitting as a group.
In the beginning of the book, we see Vetch acting with rage against his oppressors and I guess new owners. And that seems very normal. And then, like, as things get better, you still see him reacting with rage against his isolation, even though he's not actively being beaten. And he actually kind of likes the work that he's doing. And it's just a really interesting theme in the book that we probably won't talk about too much more than this, but it's just like Vetch acknowledges at one point that he uses his rage to protect himself against his own loneliness in moments like this. And like rage is something that he reaches for to protect himself. And we see his rage coming up in a bunch of different ways. Sometimes that it's like within his control, sometimes it's without his control. And I just think it's really interesting to show. I mean, male rage is sort of like a conversation in fiction that's been going on. So I think this is a really interesting portrayal of it. I think it's really
Mhm.
interesting how it comes out as a person who is oppressed and then doesn't have a
Mhm.
way of enacting it.
Yeah.
So I just think it's a really, I don't have there's no concrete thing to say about it. I just think there's a lot of really interesting themes in this book, and this is one of them.
Yeah, and it's really well done. It is really interesting.
Yeah, it's not one thing, which is exciting.
So Vetch does walk around the compound to familiarize himself with it, so he knows where everything is now in the compound. But at night, as he's in his cot with Kashet, Ari will come and spend time with Kashet, and he'll also talk to Vetch. And Ari, first time he comes to talk to Kashet and also Vetch, he talks to him about his past and he talks about raising Kashet from the egg and he talks about the process. Like he talked to the egg before it hatched so that he could start the bonding process because he noticed dragons will make sounds to their egg. And this is where we learn all of that information about how the other the other dragon, like there are these cultural reasons why they don't want to, as well as practical reasons why they don't want to just raise dragons from an egg, why they catch them. And we see that Ari really thinks this is really quite stupid. And then this is also where we get Ari's backstory, where he was a scribe before he was a jouster, so he has this more intellectual understanding of the world. He has this really great understanding of history. So he over time like talks to Vetch about like he gives Vetch updates about like what's happening in the war, which Vetch really appreciates because otherwise he is very cut off from everything that's outside of the stables. And Ari says to Vetch, he's like, the Altons are like, they are fighting us, like they are attacking us. They are a force as well. Like they are not just like an oppressed group. But he does fully acknowledge that Tia is the colonizing force, like is the invasive force that is trying to invade into Alta. And he tells Vetch that they probably first learned how to ride dragons from the Altons like hundreds and hundreds of years ago when Tia was actually being invaded by another force that Tia was eventually able to beat back.
Tia was fully colonized. Ari's kind of like, he doesn't say this, but he's like, 500 years ago, like, I would have been the serf and someone else would have been ruling us. And the only reason that we're here is because of the Altans who gave us the resources to break us out of the system we were in.
Yeah, and then we see the cycle of violence, right? The cycle of oppression that happens and that Tia is not willing to look at their past as look at their present as then being the same as the people who did conquer them. They are unwilling to acknowledge that similarity at all. And Ari sees it because he was a scribe and he was trained in history. But he even says like the average person might not even know this or see these similarities.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, it complicates the Tians because we learn
Mhm.
that actually not too long ago they were an oppressed people, but obviously it doesn't justify their current oppression.
No.
And the Altans are not blameless within the war that is happening between them, but also their reward for helping the Tians out was their own oppression. And you just see this swirling and swirling of violence between these different people. And you're just like, oh, this is a system that, like, they are locked in and there's no way out. At one point, one person's on the top, but in a couple hundred years, it might be completely different and there's no way out of it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to to recognize that although the Altons are active participants and still very strong in their fighting force, that doesn't make them equal in their wrongness, and their transgressions to the Tians because the Tians are still this invasive force that are trying to colonize Alta, and Alta fighting back isn't portrayed in this book as wrong, but they're also not portrayed as like, "Oh, we're helpless, like, we didn't do anything, we can't even protect ourselves." They are portrayed as like, no, they're still like they have an active military and they're still able to make gains within this warfare, but that doesn't negate all of the crimes that Tia is enacting against them by trying to invade them, which is interesting.
It's just so complex.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
And like realistic.
yeah,
That's sort of, we have our own cycles of war and violence that certain places are unable to escape. It's like,
yeah.
it's just, I would have thought that this was a book for children because the main character is a children. And like, I do think that
Is a
is
children.
a child, is a children, but just the themes and the complexity are like really deep and complicated and
Mhm,
important. And
mhm.
I actually do think that a younger person could read this and it would be useful for a younger person to read this to understand that things are not black and white.
Yeah.
It's just a really good book, guys. It's just so good.
Yeah. Time moves on. Vetch is acknowledged as a hard worker by the overseers, which again, Vetch is worried that this will make the boys more violent towards him or more hateful towards him. Ari starts to visit him each night and they talk about dragons. He tells Vetch a lot about the process of raising Cashit. They also talk about other things too. Vetch does feel less alone through this. He also is starting to think like, this guy's really lonely. He needs a friend. About Ari, like, his only friend is this dragon, because he is kind of isolated in this group, and Ari has this speech later in the book that I'll get to, where he does talk about this.
I mean, he's been basically shot into the nobility and
Yeah.
he doesn't like nobles.
No.
So it's like, oh, all of the people I can talk to suck. So I guess I'll talk to my dog, I mean, dragon, Cash it.
Yeah. One morning, Harakat orders Vetch to clean everything out of Kashit's stall because the priests are going to renew the heat spell on his wallow, and Vetch hides so he can watch it. When Ari returns, he tells Vetch.
Can we just take a second
Yeah.
and say this is the first time we've seen actual magic in the book, and it's like kind of cool. You just have a bunch of like weird, silly priests and priestesses in elaborate garbs like dancing around. So it's also kind of an extent of like something silly, but it's like actual magic. So
Mhm.
it's cool. Before we've just heard a lot about ghosts and curses and stuff. So magic's real.
Magic's real, and it seems like the Tians have a specific kind of magic that deals with, like, heat, and the Altans have a specific kind of magic that deals with water and wind. I don't know if they also have like, they have specialties, but they also have the ability to do these other forms of magic, or if it's because of the landscape that they're in, we don't know. When Ari returns, he tells Vetch that they heat the sand by transferring the heat from the king's palace. So the palace is always very cool. And Cashit loves it. He's like, "Oh, yeah, it's so warm."
Yeah, he just flops around and is very cat in a Sunday window coated.
Yeah, he, like, buries himself in it. The rainy season arrives. The dragons absolutely hate it. They hate going outside in the rain. They're like a dog that hates the rain. They pull canvas over their stalls to keep out the rain, but the corridors are still open, so they don't even like going into the corridors. And they still have to exercise the dragons because they'll get, like, kind of fat if they and, like, kind of moody if they don't exercise, but they can't go on, like, full patrols with them. Cashit will, like, completely bury himself in his wallow, and he, like, will refuse to leave until, like, the next time he has to go out somewhere, which is very cute. Vetch's duties are also fewer now because there are some things that they can't do during the rainy season, so he hangs out with Cashit a lot, and on one day that he's with Cashit when it's raining quite hard, Ari and Haraket come to get him and tell him that Kefti has come to reclaim him, and there will be a hearing. So he's taken to the magistrate, which is also in this compound, and Kefti is there too, and he's, like, he's very fearful that his time here has come to an end. Kefti argues that he needs him as a serf so that he can retain his property, and he talks about how he's improved the building that he lives in, and he is being a good steward of the land. Ari argues that he was mistreating Vetch and that Vetch is now inseparable from Cashit, and Cashit won't accept another dragon boy because he's kind of imprinted on Vetch. So the magistrate's like, "Okay, go get Cashit and, like, prove it. Go get him and bring him through the rain to the hearing room." Vetch is like, "This isn't going to work," but he goes and he, like and Cashit's like, "I don't wanna get up." But he's like, "Come on, Ari needs you, Ari needs you." And he keeps saying, like, "Ari, you need to go to Ari." And Cashit's like, "Okay, I'll go to Ari." And he, like, very, like, reluctantly gets out of his wallow. And then as they pass the scale burnishing room, Cashit looks over to the scale burnishing room like, "Maybe a burnish, perhaps?" It's so cute. And and Vetch is like, "No, we have to go to Ari." And he's like, "Okay."
At one point, they get into the rain, and he's just like, "No,
He's like, "I don't want to." Yeah.
I'm wet."
And so Vetch is like, "I'm never gonna be able to get him into that room," but as he, like, gets closer to the room, Ari is standing in the doorway. So Cashit sees him and is like, "Ari!" And then he, like, "Do, do, do, do," like, trots into the room and is like, "I'm here with my person now." But to the magistrate, it looks like Vetch was able to just bring him the whole way and that he was following Vetch. So Ari's, like, really subtle in the things that he does to help Vetch, and we see, like, how wily he is for the first time here. And the magistrate is impressed because it is impressive that he was able to get Cashit to come in the rain even in the first place. So he makes his statement and he says that the house will be put in Kefti's name. It'll be taken out of like the domain of the serfdom. But the Tala field will be maintained as land owned by the king, and other serfs will be assigned to that land. So he's completely taking that away from Kefti. So Kefti can no longer get an income from the Tala field, which was how he was really enriching himself this whole time. And you can see like the magistrate is really hateful of Kefti and like is seen through his act, but he's being very diplomatic in his approach. Do you want to talk about this scene because there's a lot of power in this scene?
We sort of touched about it, but there's a lot of overlapping circles of power that are in play with this. where like Kefti is trying to wield power over Vetch, and then Vetch has no power in this situation because he's a serf. But Ari and Harakat have power in this situation, but not over Kefti, and like kind of not over Vetch. But they're trying to negotiate the power they have over the serf Vetch. And then all of these parties have to like appeal to the magistrate, and the magistrate is like trying to pretend to be this like fair arbiter of the law, but Vetch can tell pretty early on when Kefti is making his appeal that he like fucking hates Kefti's guts. And then the magistrate just kind of like fucks up Kefti's shit, not necessarily because Vetch is so good at getting this dragon, which is like the excuse he uses, but just because he really doesn't like Kefti and he can because he has power. So you just sort of see basically how law is used as a thin veil that power can be used to be wielded over people, you
Mm,
know?
yeah.
It's a really complicated and complex scene that I think is like really good.
It's really well done. It's really well done. And you feel how fearful Vetch is throughout the entire scene because he is kind of spiraling through this whole scene of like, "Oh, I'm gonna have to go back," and he's thinking about all of the outcomes that are possible. Again, it's that survival mode, like, I need to try to figure out every possibility in the situation so that I can navigate it.
It's so darkly funny because this grumpy dragon holds this child's life in its paws. Vetch's entire life could get derailed and he could have nothing but endless suffering because Kashit did not want to get wet.
Yeah.
It's just a really funny scene. But
Yeah.
this book's great.
Yeah. The next day, Vetch gleefully thinks of Kefti's misery as he, like, cleans Ari's chambers and hangs out with Kashet, which is very sweet. Ari continues to sit with Vetch each night. He asks him one night, "Are you making friends?" And he asks him if he's happy.
It's so funny. I'm sorry because Vetch is like, "No, you dumb bitch. I'm a serf." Like, what?
Yeah.
But he doesn't
Um,
say that. He just kind of looks at him and he's like,
yeah, there's a scene, I don't know where exactly it is, but there's a scene where Ari asks, like, "So what did happen to your family? Like, what did happen to your farm?" And Vetch has this really this trauma response where he relives what happens to his like, what happened to his family, and then we get that backstory where his family owned a farm that was their ancestral home for, generations, and he was the youngest sibling, and the only boy, so he had this, like, specific status within his family of being the baby and also being the heir. So he was like, acknowledges that he was insufferable, like, he pranked his sisters all the time because he could get away with it, and he could be kind of, like, bratty and get away with it because he was so important to his family, even at, like, that young age, and that they were not even close to any of the fighting. And so when the Tian soldiers came to speak to their father, he didn't know what was going on at all because he was so young, and his mother was, like, keeping them in the house, but they were watching his father talk to the Tian soldiers the from a window, and that he watches his father reach for his sickle, which his father was like he describes his father as a really, really gentle man, that he would never pick up a weapon in anger, so he was really confused by this action just because of that, but because he picked up the sickle, the Tian soldiers killed him. And so he watched his father die, and then they were brutally, like, taken away from their home and separated by the Tian soldiers after that. So he has a lot of anger towards his father because he has this kind of, incorrect assumption or, like, incorrect feeling that I think he even acknowledges, like, it wouldn't have mattered, but he has this feeling, well, if he hadn't picked up that sickle, this wouldn't have happened. He wouldn't have died. Which the reality is they would have found any reason to kill him and take this land.
yeah, he finds out later that they couldn't have taken the land unless someone on the land had like raised up
Mhm.
against him as like violence,
Yeah.
which is the law. And then, of course, Ari's like, yeah, but they probably tricked him into doing it or coerced him in some way. Like, they
Yeah,
would have gotten the land eventually. they would have terrorized him into some sort of reaction. So it sort of shows you once again how laws are just exist to continue power and oppression.
But I think it also shows you, like, the layers of trauma and how that kind of experience can cause us to blame the wrong parties because we're just searching for a logical answer to why this happened to us when there really is no logical answer other than people are evil. Like, people have the capacity to be exceedingly evil and cruel.
Yeah, the text allows you to draw a lot of conclusions from it, which is why it's a good book.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna keep talking about how good it is.
Yeah, but I love that complexity, of his trauma and his past and his feeling towards his father, his feelings toward Haraket and Ari, his feelings towards the Dragon Compound as a whole is so complicated that it's really interesting to dissect. Going back to the plot, Vetch learns that he likes all of the dragons, even the ones who aren't Kasha. He thinks they're really beautiful. He'll like speak to them as he walks past them. He just has a real interest in them as animals. And one night he finds that Ari has left him an altar for his father. And up to this point, Vetch's father was never able to have any funerary rites, and this is we were talking about, like, ghosts throughout. This is how a ghost is formed, and the ghost will, like, haunt a space because they aren't able to pass into the afterlife. Vetch acknowledges that it's an Alton shrine, not a Tia shrine, and he's able to and it's, like, kind of a portable shrine. He's able to, like, open it up and close it. So he sets it up, and it's very richly adorned. It has these little clay figurines of servants and food, and I think there's, like, a fishing pole, and there's a votive figure of his father and, like, all of this stuff. So Vetch, like, also acknowledges, like, this would have been extremely expensive for him to purchase. But he has this real moment of catharsis where he's crying, and he is able to pray, and he's able to finally let go of some of his anger and grief because he finally feels like he's able to lay his father to rest, that his father isn't just, like, being tortured by being in this state of undead, but not able to enter the afterlife.
Yeah, I mean, it's like one of the greatest things that another person in this world can give another person, and it's
Yeah.
Arya is literally killing Altons to continue the war and the colonization of his people, and also he allowed his father's eternal soul to finally rest.
Yeah.
So, Vetch has a lot of feelings.
Yeah, and Vetch does kind of have this moment where he's like, is he doing this because he feels guilty about the violence that he has perpetuated against my people? He acknowledges that, like, this probably isn't a completely altruistic act on Ari's part, which is probably true. Like, it can be two things, right? He can do it because he cares about Vetch, and he can also be doing it because he has guilt over the crimes that he's so this world, because this is pretty much based on, like, ancient Egyptian culture and their calendar, they have a river that does flow north like the Nile and floods once a year, so their calendar is based on when the river floods, and it floods at the end of the rainy season. So the flood comes, which means that the patrols will start again, and here's when Vetch really starts to bombard Ari with questions about dragons. Vetch is permitted to go to the training grounds to watch them practice for the first time as well. So he goes and he's watching and he sees like all these rich people around and he has this moment of like he has an eat the rich moment. I have the quote actually. Can I read it?
Please do. This is one of my favorite scenes.
So the rich people have come to watch the jousters practice. These then were people that the boys had spoken of, who gave them money to carry letters to the jousters, who bet upon the outcome of their combat, who desired their presence at their entertainments, as if the jousters themselves were some form of entertainer. And something else occurred to Vetch at that moment, as he watched their avid faces. They did not go to war themselves, but they certainly profited from it. They did no fighting. When the fighting was over, it was they who had gained more land, more goods, more money in their coffers. He found himself suddenly filled with such hatred that he had to look away from them, lest by his expression he betray himself. Not that he cared if they knew he hated them, but that he might get Ari into endless trouble. I think that was a great quote.
We don't talk about it a lot, but this book really says all warfare is class warfare. It's
Yeah.
so great to read a fantasy book that's pretty much anti monarchy, since so many of them are like, no, I think it's great that this one family rules everyone and gets all of the money and lives in a fancy castle, mostly because I want to write stories about people going to balls and wearing fancy dresses.
Yeah.
And it's just so refreshing to read a book where it's like all of these rich nobles suck and are shitty people, and actually the poor people and slaves are great. And it's like, yeah, yep, yep,
Yeah.
yep, yep.
Yeah. In the sky, while Vetch is having this eat the rich moment, Ari is flying Cachet with two more novice dragon riders. And it seems like he's kind of coaching them how to do a maneuver. Vetch also acknowledges that there are these huge nets laid out above the trees that could potentially catch them if they were to fall from the dragons. He's watching this maneuver happen and he's like, something's wrong here. The dragons don't seem like they're acting quite right with each other. And then all at once, the one dragon like kind of swoops too close to the other dragon. And the one jouster smacks the other jouster with his lance and it knocks him off of the dragon and he starts plummeting towards the ground.
Yeah, hits him directly in the face and like breaks his skull, maybe?
Yeah, it sounds like it cracks his skull. And Vetch has this really interesting trauma response that does feel similar to depictions of PTSD, where he's watching this guy fall and he's like, oh no, he's going to miss the nets. Oh no, he's going to die. And then he is thinking of his father. So I have the quote. Vetch's stomach lurched again. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. He seemed to be paralyzed as the body hurtled towards the earth, unchecked. In a moment, there would be a spreading stain of red on the pale baked earth, like Kieran's blood, which is his father's name, and the smell of death when his father lay despised on the ground in the yard of his own house, and the buzzing of flies coming for the blood as they came to feast on Kieran's. And then it dashes. So he's having this moment where he's unable to kind of separate this event that he's witnessing currently with the death of his father. And he's also having this like confusion with along with those kind of mixed memories where he's like, I should be cheering this on. This jouster is going to die horrifically. But all I can think about is, and then he's like reliving it on and he's frozen in space and he's having this really traumatic response to it. And as he's watching this happen, Ari is actually able to swoop down with Cachet and catch the jouster before he hits the ground. And it's described as like this impossible moment, like he moves impossibly fast. Ari later explains that he's practiced this with Cachet, where he'll have Cachet like switch back his neck and then snap it out. And he describes it as like a heron catching a fish, where they like snap out their necks to catch the fish, but he goes underneath what he's trying to catch instead of like grabbing it in his mouth. So he's able to catch the jouster before he hits the ground. He carries him to the ground. He tells Vetch to run to tell Harakat what happens. Vetch does so, and he's able to tell Harakat to get like these specific healers. And when he returns to the training ground, he comes in time to see the two dragons mating. And it's described in like kind of heavy detail. The dragons like go really high up into the sky. They like do these really aggressive swoops. He says that there's a moment where they look like they're fighting really violently with each other, and then they both fly really, 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 really high. They lock claws and they plummet, which is like when bald eagles mate. It sounds like where she got her inspiration from, where the bald eagles will lock claws and then they'll drop.
Vetch is like, thank God the one on the lady dragon gets locked out, because otherwise that dude would have been crushed by that guy dragon. And also that there's that dude on the guy dragon that's just like holding on for dear life,
To your
just
life.
like clearly shitting his own pants, just holding on there. It's I don't know, it's kind of that's
Yeah.
kind of funny. And then even though it's like a very serious scene.
Yeah, it's a really dramatic scene. After the dragons mate, the female tries to fly away. Like there are these mountains in the distance that if the dragons escape, they like always try to get to. So she's flying towards them, and Ari and Cachet then have to chase the female back. So Vetch is watching this like really like agile maneuver on Cachet's side where like he's able to kind of route the female and guide her back by edging around her in such a way that she has to turn if she doesn't want to run into him. And they're able to get her on the ground. He goes over top of her and is slowly going down, down, down. So she's forced to like go to lower her altitude as well until she like hits the ground.
I was gonna just say it's a really cool scene where it shows, like, kind of the strategy involved in Dragon, where, like, Kasha gets in a very specific position of, like, above and, like, around the person that forces the dragon down.
Yeah. And they're able to grab her and take her back to her stable. Vetch then helps Ari get off of Cashit and gets Cashit back to the stable, and he, like, talks about how hot. Like, he's like, he smells hot, like, he smells like heat and, like, how hot Cashit's skin was, and then he says, like, Ari smells like his dragon, and Ari's, like, livid and is kind of incensed and runs away, and, and he's tending to Cashit then, and then start to calm down. They find out that the person who was knocked off of his dragon is going to survive. The other one is, like, I think forced back into training or something, but the dragon boy who was taking care of the female dragon throws, like, this huge fit in the courtyard and says that he can't work with this dragon anymore, whose name is Corazon, that she's too violent, that he's afraid of her, and he quits. And then Vetch is like, "I am seeing an opportunity here," and tells Harakat that he is willing to tend both Kashet and Corazon if he can have his other duties taken over for him, and Harakat agrees.
And Vetch is like, "Hey, hey, hey, I get free access to that egg. I'm about to build the slowest getaway car ever. Let's go."
Yeah, we also learn, like, Ari explains to him because I don't know if it's, like, when Ari first lands, Vetch is like, "Is she gonna lay eggs?" And Ari's like, "Well, most dragon eggs are actually sterile. They usually have to, like, mate multiple times to try to get a fertile clutch." So Vetch is then like, "Oh, no, like, I need to be careful about which dragon egg I pick because I might pick a sterile one and blah, blah, blah." Harriet then watches him with Corazon when he was first taking over his duty, and she is obviously very, very, very different from Cashit because she was a wild dragon. She is very testy. Her tail, like, she'll use it to whip at people and try to trip them and try to snap against them. Like when a dog's tail, like, is wagging really forcefully and it hits you, it can really hurt. So I can't imagine how much a dragon tail would hurt. And she is apparently even more active with her tail with people. She also, like, when Vetch first enters her stable, her stall, she, like, snaps at him, so she snaps at him really quickly, but he doesn't flinch, and he realizes that she was actually snapping above his head, so it was like a warning test because she wanted to see if he would flinch, but because he doesn't react, she, like, kind of calms down. He also notices that she wasn't really cared for properly. The previous dragon boy wasn't feeding her enough, and he wasn't caring for her scales well. So Vetch is able to really.
Can I just say this is a really funny series of scenes because there's multiple, like a chapter or two of just Vetch and Harakat and Ari just like shitting on these jousters and
Yeah.
Dragon Boy being like, they suck so hard at their job. They were too afraid of their dragons. They didn't feed them enough. And then they talk about the demotions that they all get. The book languishes in the suffering of these characters we did not know existed until like 15 pages ago. It's, like, kinda funny and silly. I don't know. It's a weird part of the book, but it really paints a meritocracy, which is interesting, but
Mm.
mostly it's just like, "Heh these people sucked and they got what they deserved, but this dragon is great, and I'm gonna treat it well by feeding it and not being afraid of it, and genuinely being a good dragon boy, and that'll solve this whole situation."
Yeah, one of the things that Vetch says when he's trying to convince Haraket to let him take over the duties of caring for her is he says, "There are no bad dragons here, there are just bad trainers." And, you could probably read this as because Corazon is reacting really badly and she's really misbehaving, it's because she's mistreated. So then the assumption is that she's just a bad dragon when it's because she was being mistreated by her caretaker. You could probably easily draw parallels to other aspects of the society mistreating its lower classes and its enslaved people. But he really takes care of her. He is able to bring her back to her healthy weight. He's able to bring her scales back to their luster. She's really beautifully described. She's scarlet red and her limbs are turquoise. And it's described her limbs turn to turquoise through like these veins of turquoise that come up through her bodies. And Harkat is like watching him gain the trust of this other dragon and how he's able to really work with her and how she's always going to be wild. She's never going to be like Hachette, but he is able to get her to a really manageable state because of how he is caring for her and how he is able to respond to her needs and her emotions and able to really observe what she's feeling, what she's reacting to, and how he can then work around those things, which is really interesting to experience. She lays her first egg, and Vetch agonizes over whether or not he should steal this one or wait for the next one. And Harkat keeps asking him, like, has she laid her eggs yet? And he's like, oh, no, she hasn't. And then Ari, like, that night, he comes to him and he's like, Cashit was strong because he was the first egg she laid. And so Vetch is like, okay, I'm going to steal the first egg. So he steals it and then buries it in the empty stall next to Cashit. He wakes up early and turns the egg each morning before he tends Cashit and Corazon. Corazon also doesn't seem to be overly bothered by the egg's absence. Ari then asks about Corazon's egg, and then he winks at Vetch and says there will never be another Cashit.
Okay, this was absolutely insane because so Vetch looks at an egg and then he's like, I don't know if I should take them. Ari said that most of the eggs are sterile. And then literally like 14 seconds later, Ari's like, the first egg is the best egg. And then yeah, Ari asks about the egg and then just like winks at him and he's like, too bad there will never be another catch. It winks. And that's when I texted you and I was
Yeah.
like, where are you in this book? I need to ask you if you think Ari knows what's going on.
Yeah, we both were like, Ari definitely is trying to get Vetch to hatch this egg. Like, he's trying to get Vetch. And then I was even like, did he orchestrate the two dragons mating to try to get Vetch to be able to hatch this egg?
No, 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 no. I spent most of the book because they have these two scenes back to back, and I'm like, okay. And
Yeah,
then
he
it ends up
knows.
he knows, and then he also talks about how Ari. We'll get into it. Like later isn't around as much, and I'm just like, okay. And then they tell us later. We'll get to this scene, but it's just like, ah.
Yeah, Corazon lays a few more eggs. It's like once every 3 days, and Harkat removes them, and we're told that he just disposes of them as she's laying them. Vetch describes the egg as having like a sandstone quality to it, and he's turning it 3 times a day. Ari then gossips to Vetch. Like, he knows that he can't tell Vetch this information, but so he talks to Cashit when Vetch is around, and he's like, "If I were to tell someone, I'm going to tell Cashit." And he tells him what happens to the other riders. So the one was demoted, and the other one, I don't even remember, but so we can see, like, how Vetch is really becoming this confidant to Ari, and Ari really does see him as, a friend, which is very cute. He then hears from Harakat that Ari received it's called, like, the Gold of Honor from the king, which were these gold armbands.
You say he hears. Harakat is like complaining to Vetch, like a gossipy old woman, where he's
Yeah.
like, I can't believe he got this award from the king and he's not even proud about it. But then also, Harakat is also like, yeah, I'm glad that you're not one of those fucking stuck up nobles that are like all about pomp and circumstance. It's a cute scene. It shows like both of their characterization really well.
Yeah, they bicker a lot in a very cute way, Arquette and Ari. The ritual of planting then begins, and when the ritual of planting begins, the king holds a banquet that's multiple days, which Ari is like, I don't want to go to that. And Harkat again like snipes at him and he's like, you need to earn the king's favor. And this is where Ari has that speech about like ownership.
Sorry, I've been fighting with my cat about whether or not she wants to scream outside my closed door or come in. Where were you?
So Ari's voice went stone hard. Suppose I were to put myself forward. Then I must guard my tongue, waking and sleeping, lest someone who wishes to be more favored takes some word of mine and twists it, and whispers it to the great king's ear. I could not choose my own friends, my own pastimes, nothing, for fear that someone who does not love to see me raised on high might find a weapon to bring me down. I would be more of a prisoner than a serf, who at least may command his own thoughts. I think not. That sort of life is not for me. Now, if such honors would grant me the freedom to study dragons, rather than to use them as weapons, then they would be of value to me. As it is, they are worth less than the sand in dry season. So he's talking about how he is unable to like control his fate because he's a dragon rider there, which is quite interesting. And how he doesn't want the king's favor.
And also like the politics of the court that he's also trying to navigate. So while Vetch is trying Can you hear my cat screaming?
No.
Okay. Sorry. So yeah, in that we get to see like in Vetch we've seen I guess it's not court politics, but it kind of feels like court politics of the dragon barn that he's working at, where like he has to do a good job, but he can't do too good of a job because then the freeborn people might take offense, and if they take offense they might try to concoct some reason to fuck with him, or they might just fuck with him, or like all of this stuff. And then you see Ari also being like, if I get too close to power, then people who want to get close to power will try to get close to me, or they'll try to usurp me. And like all of the dynamics that exist for him are similar but different, and they're like both trapped as sort of
Mhm.
outsiders within this system that they're stuck in.
Yeah. Haruket then has this idea after watching Vetch work with these dragons so well, and he knows that Vetch grew up on a farm and that Vetch had experience with animals before he became a serf. And he's like, well, what if we bring in other people who have experience with animals to be the dragon boys instead of just these like children of highborn people who are trying to get like a leg up early on, like an internship?
I thought this was an idea that Vetch brings to Haruket. I thought this was Vetch's idea.
I thought Haruket came to him and was talking to him about it. Like, he asked
I
Vetch
think
his
it's
opinion.
I think it's both of them. Where like Haruket's like, I think we need to expand it, and we need to go move away from freeborn people. And then Vetch is like, I have a lot of experience on the farm with animals. You should look at like people who also raise other type of animals, like people who raise hounds, people who raise falcons,
Mhm.
other such things. And
Yeah.
Haruket's like, that's a brilliant idea.
Yeah, either way, Haruket is really open to Vetch's suggestions, which Vetch has never really experienced before, and he really respects Vetch's opinion. He finds a goat horde serf to replace Vetch with Corazon, and he does really well with her, so Haruket decides, like, "Yeah, I'm gonna find some other people who have these skills with animals," and Vetch kind of feels like for the first time that he has someone who he can be a friend with because this person is from the same class as him. And that night, the egg begins to move. A massive storm arrives out of nowhere because it's not the rainy season, and it brings all the dragons back immediately. There's a ton of chaos getting them into their pens. Some people are hurt. The dragons seem like they're mostly okay. There are a few like sprained wings. And the dragons are like, we're not going back out. They're like hiding and cowering in their pens.
It's worth saying that they do imply that the winds are so bad that it would, like, knock them out of the sky,
Yeah.
so it's not just that they're like, "I don't wanna be wet." They're not a airplane where that you can just fly into a thunderstorm.
Well, you can't always fly an airplane in a thunderstorm either, but, the dragons know what they're about. They're like, not in a million years. I'm not going out in that." And during all of this chaos, the egg starts to hatch. And because there's a storm going on and there's all this chaos, no one is around to see it, so Vetch is able to sit with it and stay with it, and he has to actually help chisel it out of the egg, and he's really thankful for all the thunder because he's, like, striking it with this hammer, and no one is able to hear it 'cause it just he's trying to time it with the thunder. Do you wanna add something here?
Oh, yeah. This is the beginning of the part of the book that I call Vetch is clearly blessed by the gods, because why else would these things be happening? So basically, we spend all of this time establishing the way that dragons work. So a different group of people goes out, gets the hatchling dragons, and then another group trains them up, and none of them are in the compound. They're all somewhere else. And then they come to the dragon barn that Vetch is currently working at. And like that's how they come here. And then all of a sudden, when it is most opportune for a rainstorm to come, a rainstorm comes. And then like literally like if thank God was thunder and lightning, otherwise this baby might have been discovered. And then immediately after that, more storms come and more dragons start coming, and we'll talk about that in a second. And like when he first steals the dragon egg, I'm like, there's no way he's not going to be discovered. I have no idea how they're going to do this. And then the entire dragon like barn that they're in completely changes, and you're like, oh yeah, that's how he'll not be discovered.
Yeah.
There's just so many things that we'll talk about as we keep going through, where it's just like, yeah, that's really helpful for moving the plot along.
Yeah, so the dragon, he's, like, able to open the egg, so he knows that the dragon isn't gonna suffocate while it's hatching, and then he has to feed Cashit his dinner, so he runs and he gets Cashit's meat, and he also, like, hides some smaller scraps of meat between Cashit's. And so when he finishes feeding Cashit, he comes over to the baby, and she has finished hatching. She's, like, lying on the ground, and she's this little lump, and she's, like, scarlet and gold is what her colors are. She has, like, gold on her legs and on her and she's just like she has this really skinny neck, and she's really wobbly, and he feeds her, and he feeds her until he's like her stomach is extremely round, which is very sweet, and when she finishes eating, she falls asleep on his chest, and he has this other moment of catharsis where he's crying with her on his lap, he's thinking of how beautiful she is, he's thinking about how far he's come and all that he's accomplished, and he, like, cries out to his father, and he's like, "Look what I have been able to do." And he again feels like he's able to let go of something, he's able to put some of his grief to rest, and he names his dragon Avatra.
Avatre, that's
Avatra?
that would be a French pronunciation. It's a fantasy name. It's whatever you hold in your heart to be true.
Yeah. So the next day, he finds out that the storm was sent by Alton's sea witches, which means that the dragons will be contained to Tia until the dry season when the sea witches will lose power. And they think that they can probably send a storm every like 4 days or so. He then moves his pallet to sleep with Avatra, but then has to move it back before dawn each day so that he's in the pen with Cashit when people start walking around. And he literally has to run everywhere to get all the work done in the day so that he can feed her and cash it and do all his other chores, and he during this time, he notices that Ari is, like, busy somewhere else, like, he's absent. He's not in his chambers because he has to clean his chambers, so he knows that Ari is in his chambers. He's not with Cashit, he's not flying Cashit, he's not hanging out with Cashit. He's just not around, and he's not sure what he's doing. He's never like, he's always hanging out with Cashit until this point, and then he's not.
I mean, obviously we established earlier in the book that he's fucking. So
I don't think that's what he's doing either.
I don't know either. It doesn't matter.
Like, just suddenly he's decided, like, "I've had a dry spell. I need to go."
Well, it's maybe he's out there. He's like, it's wet out there. It could be wet in
Oh,
here. Let me
god.
get to a
Ew.
a dancing lady's house, as you will.
Yeah. Cashit is really interested in Avatra. He's, like, peeking over. He's like, "What's going on in there?" The sea witches continue to send storms. Vetch is really worried because he's an Alton that the Tians will, enact their frustrations against him and he will be harmed because of it, but they don't seem to really notice other than maybe they mutter when he's around. They do start bringing in the newly caught dragonettes by order of the king. The king's trying to create such a large army of dragon riders that they won't be affected by the storm. They'll be so large that they can't keep them on the ground. And then this is when they bring in the other slaves. One of the slave are the new dragon boys, which are serfs and slaves. I think they're all slaves at this point. And one is a falconer named Bakken, who is kind of like Greek in his description. He was a slave from a land that wasn't conquered by Tia. It's just a land that they have trade with. When he's introduced, he shows them how to put a hood on a dragon because he's worked with falcons, and Harkat tells him that if he is as successful in taming the dragons, then he will free him and grant him a freedman's wages, which is really meaningful for Bakken, and this really enrages Vetch because Vetch is like, "I could do the best work possible, and I'm never going to ever be even eligible for something like that because I'm a serf and not a slave." This again, like, causes those complicated feelings in Vetch where he's like, "This man has done nothing wrong, but I still have all this resentment towards him," and it also has, again, that, like, really complex look at class dynamics between these 2 people who are both enslaved, just in different ways. Avatra grows, but because the compound is so hectic, no one actually notices her.
Yeah, it seems like they're just dragging in random dragons at random time. Like people are dying getting these and they're like, "Whoops." It's kind of crazy. It seems like a bunch of men were forced to sit alone with their own thoughts for like 2 weeks and it drove them insane.
Yeah. So time passes, and one night at dinner, Vetch is eating, and Bakken sits down beside him and is like, "Why don't you like me?" And they have this really interesting conversation about class, where Bakken kind of is like, "You don't like me because I'm going to be able to gain my freedom and you can't. And he like correctly guesses where Vetch's resentment is coming from.
I don't think we need to go super into it because we've talked a lot about how there's this layers of class that and different layers of freedom and how that interacts with different people. I just think it's really interesting because both Vetch and Bakken are like pretty aware of it and talk about it pretty openly. And Bakken's like, I'm sorry. Kind of explains the difference between serfs and slaves, which is if Vetch gets free, there's a bunch of Altons hanging around who he could like whip up into a revolt against it.
Mhm.
But Bakken doesn't have any ties here. So if he gets free, he's just like kind of hanging out. So that's why it's safe to free him and not Vetch.
Yeah, if he gets freed, he owes his freedom and his success to the Tiens, where if Vetch gets freed, he still has, all of this resentment. Like he can owe his freedom to like Harakat, but his enslavement is due to the Tiens. So there's still that like risk of of him creating some kind of I guess insurrection, I'm not sure.
I mean, that's the deeper fear of why they can't free him, which is, he talks about killing Altons all the time. So
Yeah, he thinks about it a lot. And then Bakken has this really interesting so he had and Bakken, like, says this, he, like, lays it out really plainly for Vet, and then he says, like, "Look, I also hate them." And he has this really interesting speech where he talks about the labor of lower classes being usurped by the rich, which I have a quote. "What do you call a man who calls up his servants, has hunting birds brought out to him, takes his fist, unhoods and casts it, and basks in the admiration of his peers when it takes a fat duck?" Baskin asked after a time. "You see, what he calls himself is a falconer. He has not caught the bird nor taken them at great hazard from the nest, scaling the cliffs to find them and bring them down. He has not tended them. He does not feed them. He has not trained them." The bitterness in Bakken's voice made Vetch blink in surprise. If the bird flies away, his wrath is only for the loss of a valuable possession, not because he is losing something he has invested a part of his life and self in. If it is recovered, he is pleased only because his possession is returned to him, not because he has gotten back something that is near and dear as a child. But the man who has done all those things, is not called a falconer. He is called a slave, servant, and he has not even the right to challenge the master when the master says, "I will have this bird," and he knows the bird is not fit to fly that day. Really interesting.
yeah, I mean, it's so funny how much Bakken hates the jousters and the nobles.
Yeah.
I like him.
Yeah.
It's just a great scene.
Yeah. Bakken then asks, because he knows Vetch is really unafraid of dragons, he asks him for his help in training one of the dragons so it can get used to having a rider on his back because Vetch is so small and the dragon is not big enough to have an adult on its back. And through this, Vetch is actually able to learn how to train Avatra through like different harnesses and like how to train her to be ready to have someone on her back and all this stuff because he's working with Bakken. And he again is relieved of his regular chores. So he's only working with dragons right now. So he's able to stay in the stables all day.
Once again, all of the world shifts around to help Vetch train and raise his dragon so he can escape. And it's just
Well, Vetch does pray a lot. Maybe they're listening.
look, if in the next book we find out that the sea witches could see the future and knew he was coming, that would totally make sense to me.
Yeah.
There's so much of this book where it's like, oh, Vetch clearly needed these stars to align for this to work, and it did. And it's not quite a Deus Ex Machina, so it doesn't feel very tired, but it really is like, man, this little child has a god personally looking at him.
Yeah. So he starts stealing toys for Avatra and he steals harnesses to help train her. The dry season does come and there are 2 days of festivities to celebrate this. So Vetch is like, "I'm not going because I'm a little bit afraid that someone will harm me because I am an Alton." And he's also like, "I don't really want to celebrate their ability to continue destroying my homeland." So he's with Kashet, and during the first day, Ari comes back, or he's in Kashet's pen, and Ari comes back angry, and he lands Kashet, and he tells Vetch that an orchard that's near the compound, which is on Alton land, was attacked the day before, and that the jousters had decided to basically as retribution for these sea witch attacks, they decided to go to the orchard and pick up anyone they saw, like have the dragons pick them up and drop them from a height. And that these jousters were then joking about it at the festivities because one of the games was the jousters would like pick up a bag of sand and then drop it on a target. And they were like joking about drawing a target the next time they did this and then trying to drop the people onto the target to kill them. And these were all civilians. These were just people who lived on the orchard. And Ari is just like incensed and very upset and horrified at like what his people are willing to not only do but take pleasure in doing. And he then says that children were killed as well. He screams that he will not kill children and then runs away. And Vetch is also like horrified by this. He cries so hard he disassociates. Like when he comes back to himself, it's like evening and Cashit is like sitting over him and he notices that Avatra has also come out of her pen and is trying to comfort him. And he decides then, he's like, I'm going to take Avatra as soon as I can and fly her to the Alton General and tell him everything that I've learned about dragons. So it really hardens his resolve that he's going to leave. And he really focuses on training Avatra for the next few days. He also notices that Ari is avoiding him. He's not coming to the stable at night to spend time with Cashit at all. And Cashit is really sad because of it. And he thinks it's because Ari is avoiding him because he's so ashamed of what happened. So he lies to Ari and says, "Hey, like, Bakken told me to sleep in the stall next to Cashit with the baby dragon there to help train her." And Ari's like, "Oh, yeah, the little red dragon?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's fine. You can do that." And then that night, when he's with Avatra in her pen, Ari then comes and is talking to Cashit. Vetch is then discovered right as Avatra is making her first flight. He's like training with her and like jumping around with her to try to get her used to it. And as he's doing this, another dragon boy spots him and like yells out. And Avatra gets spooked and takes flight.
I do have to say, Ari talks about how you have to scare dragons into flying because otherwise they'd never take off. And that's exactly what happens in this scene.
Yeah.
Like both Vetch and Avatar both get spooked, and Avatar just like takes off like a horse.
Yeah. And so he's flying, he's like yelling at her to fly, and he's being pursued by 3 dragons. 2 of them give up and peel off. And then he sees that the third is Ari and Kashet. And he's like, "Oh, they're gonna catch me. There's no way they're not gonna catch me."
They put him in the same position that Corazon gets in, that like Cashit is above her and forcing her into the ground. And they're actually weirdly they're like headed to the same rocks that
Yeah.
Corazon was headed to. So it's some instinctual thing there.
Yeah, and Vetch decides he's like, "I would rather die. I would rather die." And then Avatra will fly off and she'll be free and she'll be with the other dragons. Then him take me back and get punished for this. So he decides he's going to jump from her if they get to a point where he knows they won't be able to escape. And he does. He jumps from her back. And he's crying as he's doing this. He's like really upset that this is like the end of his life.
And I was crying too. I
Oh,
literally cried during this. So I was crying because he's gonna kill himself. And I never cry at any of these books. And then Ari catches him
yeah.
and he does the same maneuver. And then I was crying even harder because like, oh no, Vetch and Ari are gonna have this like final confrontation that they've been meaning to have forever because even though they love each other, they're on 2 different sides of the war, and I was like, "No."
Yeah, and so Ari's able to catch him, they land. Avatra does land with them, and Vetch is just sobbing, like, he's just bawling because he's just a little boy. He's, like, 10, and he is like, "Ari's going to betray me." Like, he's completely decided in his brain that that is what's going to happen, and he's just so upset that it had to be Ari that caught him and that he couldn't have gotten out of it by killing himself or gotten away, and he's like, "I was so close to getting away." And then Ari finally shakes him and is like, "I'm not gonna take you back. Stop crying."
He's like, "Oh my god, clearly I'm going to help you escape. Have you not been paying attention for most of this book?" I just wanna say, talked before about how I wanna read a book. Do I wanna do a close reading? Do I wanna, like, just, like, try to read it as someone who is a casual reader and is enjoying the book? I did do a close reading of the scene. I was like, I'm gonna check in and see like if I really focus on the prose, if they stand up. And I
Mm,
actually was really impressed by the prose in this specific section. You get a lot of shorter sentences, or you get a lot of sentences that that have like a couple of words and a lot of commas between them. And then you'll get paragraphs that like end in M dashes that are like one sentences. So the writing is very quick and descriptive and and not alliterative and illustrative. And it really gives you the sense of like, oh shit, we gotta go. Oh my god, we're running. Like that sort of thing. And it was really impressive. I mean, we've been reading prose throughout this episode, so you can have gotten a taste of how like beautiful the prose is, but it was really interesting to see it shift from a more descriptive style to a more action oriented style to like
mhm.
fit the scene.
Yeah.
We're not going to talk a lot about the writing in this. We're going to talk more about the plot and the themes, but like if you're wondering is the writing good? The answer is yes.
Yeah, it's really well written. Ari is, like, looking at Avatra, and Vetch explains, he's like, "I raised her from the egg. I did what you did with Kashet." And Ari's surprised,
And proud.
which was confusing to us because we thought Ari knew. Yeah, he's really delighted. He's like, "You did!" But he's surprised. And I'm like, "You didn't know? I thought you knew."
Dude was checked out. He's like disassociating somewhere not on the compound. Like, oh, I have to do all these war crimes and be around all these war criminals, and all I want to do is be a dragon nerd. And in the background, his like adopted brother's son person is just like living on his legacy, raising a dragon, and no one's paying attention. It's real
Yeah.
funny.
Well, I wanna know what he was doing. I think we have to find out later what he was doing.
I just don't think he was important to the plot, so he wasn't there. No offense.
I
Like,
don't
this is
know.
just a well-written book, and, like, if people don't need to be places or we don't need to see them, then we see them.
Well, I kind of have a theory that Ari, because Harkat was like, "Did she lay the eggs yet? Did she lay the eggs yet?" That Harkat took the eggs to someone, and Ari was helping them rear them, is my, like, unhinged theory.
I mean, maybe. There's a lot of plot contrivances in this book,
Yeah, that's
and
true.
I don't necessarily mean it as a negative. Like, it's not a true story. It's written it's a story that was created to tell a purpose, to explore certain themes and like hit certain beats. So like
Yeah,
when someone
that's true.
doesn't need to be there, they don't need to be there. But like that's just how storytelling works. Like just because you can't logic every moment of a scene doesn't mean that this book isn't fantastic.
Yeah. So Ari leads him to this hiding place that he found somehow one day that's like in a canyon where you can't see it from above. And he's like, rest here. He brings some dead goats that he is able to kill with a sling to Avatra for her to eat. And she eats them. And there's some fresh water there and they're able to drink it. And he's like, stay here, rest. I'm gonna go figure out what's going on. When he returns, he hears him talking to another Vetch hears him talking to another jouster. And he's like, "Oh, it's such a shame that he fell and the dragon is probably long gone." And the other person's like, "Oh, yeah, like," and he's like, "Oh, you better go back. I'm gonna, like, lay out all this stuff." And so he comes in and he tells Vetch, he's like, "I convinced them all." Everyone at the compound thinks that he was just trying to prove himself by continuing, like, training another dragon, and that the dragon just took flight and took him with him. They don't think that he was trying like, no one thinks that he was trying to steal a dragon.
Well, they thought he was trying to steal a dragon, which is why they chased him, and then Ari sort of was like, "He fell and the dragon took away," and they're like, "Oh, they feel bad."
No, 'cause Ari even says, he's like, "I thought that you had just gotten caught on a dragon and that, like, you couldn't control it." Like, he's able to at least convince everyone that that is what happened. And because he's
Yeah.
like, Bakken feels really bad because he feels like you were trying to prove yourself as a dragon trainer so that you could have been freed as well.
No, I think
You
I thought this was so great because as soon as Vetch took off and they chased him down, I was like, they're gonna kill all them serfs. Like
Mm,
every serf that they brought into work, they are going to kill or like send them back to whatever terrible place they are because Vetch just proves that you can't give serfs. And then they're like, no, everyone actually thinks that Vetch died a hero in a tragedy. And I was like, oh, thank God, they're not gonna kill those serfs.
Ari also seemed like he was having a fantastic time lying and like spinning this tale for everyone. Like he seemed like he was really enjoying it. Ari comes back with all these grave goods because everyone at the compound is terrified that Vetch is going to come back as a ghost and haunt them. So they're like, yeah, take the grave goods far away and set up the shrine there for him so that his ghost won't come near the compound because they're all terrified of ghosts.
I love how afraid of ghosts people are in this book, and we have absolutely no confirmation as to whether or not ghosts are real. I think that I don't even want to know if they're real or not. I just think it's funny.
Yeah, so they set up his father's shrine in the alcove, and they take everything that is useful for their journey that was donated to them, and then they leave everything else for his father's shrine, so his father is, like, getting another set of offerings as well, and then Ari's like, "Okay, I'm gonna take you to these people who can help you get to Alta." So then they fly to these people called the Bedu people, which are, like, very obviously based off of like, I mean, the Bedouin people are also called the Bedu people, I think, and they're very similar. They're this nomadic herding society. He's able to negotiate Vetch's safe passage to Alta. He barters with them and does eventually give them the gold of honor that he was given to by the king or given by the king as payment. They're given some food and they eat, so they speak for one last time. Vetch asks him why. He's like, "Why are you willing to do this for me?" And Ari says, "Well, I never had a little brother," which is really sweet. And he also warns Vetch, he's like, "Okay, once you get there, like, try not to meet me on the battlefield because I still have my oaths." But then before Ari leaves, he asks what Vetch's real name is, and then he guesses that it's Kieran, which was his father's name. And Vetch, whose real name is Kieran, is really, really touched by this. Not only that he's asking him what his real name is, but that he was able to guess it. So the book ends with Vetch, now Kieran, traveling with the Bedu people and across their camps, and the book ends with him looking over the lands of Alta and taking flight on Avatra to pass over into his homeland. And that's how the book ends.
This is a good book.
Yeah. I feel like we talk about all of this stuff, like all of the thoughts.
Yeah, we have a bunch of thoughts that we wrote down to talk to you, dear listeners, about, but we really talked about all of them, which is usually how it works.
Yeah.
We wanted to talk to you about trauma and how it isn't clear for Vetch because, he has mixed feelings about his father, who is obviously a victim of colonization and in some ways is sort of not that like his actions started Vetch's downfall, but also like he was just a cog in the system of colonization. So there's like the love and the hatred is like really mixed up there. And the same with Ari, who treats him better than basically anyone in his life after he separated from his family, but who is like actively colonizing his people.
Yeah, we have scenes throughout the book where Vetch is praying, and he prays for Ari's and Kashet's safety, and he feels really conflicted that he's doing that, so he, like, prays in a specific way that's like, "Oh, like, keep them safe, like, don't hurt them, but have them lose," basically, to the Alton jousters because he doesn't want them to be hurt and he doesn't want them to be killed. And he also is like, I don't want Kashet to be killed, but I also don't want Ari to be killed for the sake of the other. So he's like, I don't want Kashet to be killed because Ari would be devastated. And I don't want Ari to be killed because Kashet would be devastated and probably would have to be killed as well. But also because he cares about them so much. And he feels like he's betraying his people because he cares about them.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. We also see how class muddies colonization, where instead of just having serfs and free people, you have serfs and these slaves, which are a different type of person in bondage that have different rights that are somehow like sometimes played against the serfs. And then even amongst the free people, we see the differences between the working class and the upper class and the ruling class, and just the ways that they interact with each other is really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, real eat the rich, real all warfare is class warfare. It's really beautiful in the way that it depicts these struggles, and I think it's absolutely great.
Yeah, another thing that's really interesting at the book and its portrayal of all these themes is this is a book about warfare. We never see a battlefield. So we are seeing the effects of this war on this culture, on the people who war is oppressing, but we aren't actually seeing any of the fighting. We're only seeing these power dynamics that are playing along the sidelines of these battles and of this warfare. And I think that's a really hard thing to depict well. Like it's easy to have drama and climactic action in an actual battle, but not to say that, like, writing anything is easy, but, like, in an action scene, there's a lot of action, so there's a lot of drama, and there's a lot of and this is, like, almost slice of life in that he's, like, taking care of the dragon, cleaning off the dragon, wiping down the saddle, but everything is so charged with all of these other themes that it is really intense.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's really interesting. I also think that if people are familiar with the news, like a lot of the things that are depicted are similar to things, and I don't want to talk about it because
Yeah, yeah, I understand.
it's complicated. But like if you read this book, it will ring true to you based on things that you've experienced in your life, and I think that that's like really interesting and really complicated, especially since the things that I'm talking about are happening recently, and this book is 22 years old. So it's
Well, yeah,
really
I wasn't able to find anything confirming this, but I do think because she has that dedication in the front to the first responders who were killed in the 9/11 attack. It does seem it
what an absolutely interesting and complicated depiction of warfare to come out of 2 years out of the 9/11 era. As someone who lived through that, something this nuanced is wild and incredible.
yeah, but 2003, isn't that when we invaded Iraq?
Yep.
So I think this might have been perhaps a look at that, a look at the Middle Eastern conflicts that have, they've continued in different ways in different places in the Middle East and were, happening before 2003 as well. It does really feel like that that area and that kind of those kinds of conflicts that are happening there specifically too.
Yeah, I mean, this book is so good that you can find truth in it
Mhm.
20 years ago and today.
Yeah, which in some ways is really, really sad that we can still really, really wonderful book. Definitely worth picking up.
We should just talk about the dragons. I think we should finish on that.
Sure, I do just wanna say, if you are a little bit worried about the heaviness of this book, I think in a lot of ways it was very cathartic to read.
It's a very light book.
Yeah, I feel like my anxieties and my feelings of, like, distress and my complicated feelings surrounding these current events that are happening are really seen in this book, which might be helpful for some people who are trying to kind of dissect them.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot, but this is not a book that tells you how to feel about things. It is a book that expresses a lot of complex feelings and asks how different characters will sit with them.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting.
Yeah. And characters acknowledge their complicity in these violent acts in different ways that are quite interesting as well. It's just a good book. Yeah, so let's talk about the dragons. This is another book where the dragons are completely animal. There's no magical bond, there's no telepathic link, there's no speech communication between the dragons. They're very much an animal and they have to be navigated like an extremely dangerous animal, much like in the Summer Dragon. Although the Summer Dragons did have a magical bond, they were still very animal like. Yeah.
They're cute.
They're super cute. They're super cute. Cashit is just like, "Oh my god, you fall in love with him. He's so wonderful."
So ornery and sweet.
Grumpy. He's just like a grumpy dog. There are scenes where Ari comes in and Cashit puts his head to Ari's chest, and Ari just, like, holds his head, and it's like, oh, so cute.
No, you just nailed it. Like there's a scene where like Ari comes in and Cash is like, "Mwah," and then just like puts his head on his chest and is just like the happiest dog ever because his
Yeah.
master is here to pet him. And it's really cute. And then even the other dragons that aren't tamed that we meet are like so cute and funny. Like when Vetch gets on top of the baby dragon and forces it up, it's just like, "What?" And it, like, pops up and then, like,
Yeah.
pops down, and it's like, "Gah," and it's like, "Oh, what?" And then they, like, immediately feed it treats and is like, "Yay, you did a good job." And he's like, "What? What? What? Huh? What? Food? Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's so cute.
Ugh." It's so cute.
Yeah, and when, Vetch first hatches Avatra, the chapter ends with her falling asleep on his chest, and then the next chapter starts with Vetch was totally and completely in love.
Ugh.
Because he's just immediately in love with his baby dragon, and it really shows that close bond you have with an animal that you just love so much and how, like, immediately you can just be like, "Yep, I would die for you. I love you so much," and how you, like, your dog might not be doing anything interesting, you're like, "You're just the cutest, wonderfulest little thing in the world, and I love you so much. Look at this perfect little creature," and the dog's just, like, sleeping, but you're like,
That
"Yes, perfect."
I was gonna say the hatching scene is also really great with her eventing, like, breaking through a little bit and then him helping together like a mom would,
Mhm.
and she's just, like, tuckered out and, like, hangs out in the egg for a little bit, and then they, like, start again. It's, like, really cute. I think these are some of the most I'm trying to find a word for characterization. Like, these dragons have the most character of any dragons we've read in a long time.
Have a lot of presence.
Yes, but they don't talk. Like, it's
No.
very interesting to have a lot of character and not talk,
Yeah.
but they balance it really well.
And they just feel really realistic. Like, the, like, depth to which Mercedes Lackey describes their emotions and their reactions and their responses and the way that they have to be navigated because they are so dangerous feels like, yeah, she did her research, like, she knew what she was talking about when it came to a dangerous animal, but an animal that is really intelligent and an animal that, like, isn't going to respond like a human and shouldn't be expected to. And, like, that's one of the things that, like, Vetch really understood. Corazon is reacting this way because of these negative experiences that she has had, not because she's spiteful or evil. I just read this book recently called, Running with Sherman, which is about a donkey, so very different animal. Good book, though, great book. And one of the things that the guy was talking about was the donkey who was abused before he had it was he was responding in really interesting ways to him, and he was interpreting those responses as spiteful. And he's like, "Oh, he's, like, being spiteful or passive aggressive," and this horse trainer was talking to him, and he's like, "Animals don't do that." They're responding that way for a reason. If you can figure out the reason, then you can fix the response, but don't think they're doing it out of spite. And that was, like, a really interesting statement in that book that I feel like is what Vetch is literally doing with Corazon in this book, where he is able to understand that these animals are responding to these because of past experiences and not specifically out of spite or because 'cause they're just trying to, like, get one over on, like, these humans. Because they're animals, and animals don't think that way. So good. Such a really wonderful look at a really animalistic dragon.
And from, like, a storytelling perspective, these animals' characters have a lot of agency within the
Yeah,
story themselves, which makes them compelling.
yeah.
If they didn't have any agency, we wouldn't care what they do, but they do, so it's interesting.
Yeah, I also really liked that like, I really loved Corazon as a character, and we were able to see that even this really wild dragon that is never going to be, like, cutesy and is never going to want belly rubs and is never going to, like, cuddle in the way that Kashet does, you still really love her as a character and as a creature, and you still, like, can sense her power and her presence and her beauty and her differences, and you can really respect them instead of it being like, "Oh, yeah, like, we love Corazon, all these other dragons suck." You feel that still that, like, love for that creature even though she is much more wild and more difficult to work with.
I think on that note, we should talk about what our next book is, 'cause I
Yeah. So,
yeah.
this has been Joust by Mercedes Lackey. What are we reading next, JoJo?
So we're doing something we've never done before.
We're reading the sequel!
Yeah, we both love this book so much, and I should say, we probably would have done this with The Summer Dragon if
Yeah.
there was a second book, and when it comes out, we will read that.
Yeah.
But we just love this book so much, and we wanna see where it goes next, and I think we're also just kind of tired of reading origin stories, which is just what happens when you read the first book in a series.
Yeah.
So we're going to read the sequel to Joust, which is Ulta, also by Mercedes Lackey, obviously.
Yeah. And we're going to see what happens once Vetch gets back to his homeland.
I'm very excited to see what Ulta is like. We saw a lot of Tia. Just, I don't think it's going to be all flowers and roses over there. And I'm really interested to see how complicated it is for Vetch going forward. Or wait, should I say
Oh, Chiron. Yeah.
Chiron? That's going to be so annoying to change the name of a main character in the middle of the series, but we'll figure it out.
Very bold of Mercedes Lackey to do that, I have to say. Yeah, I think that probably we're going to still have conversations around class, I would assume, right? So that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a like and hit the subscribe or follow button.
Would you recommend this book to others? What did you think of our podcast? Let us know in the comments below.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.